Is Delphine ready for tonight? That's what the barista asked my husband. Cheerful, casual, like she'd asked him 100 times before. I was standing right next to him at Foxy Loxy Cafe on Bull Street in Savannah, Georgia. 7:14 in the morning. I was holding his hand. My name is Marisol. His name is Ansel. The barista's name tag said Priya. Delphine was not my name. Ansel didn't flinch. He didn't look at me. He just said, double shot, oat milk, no sugar, and a lavender honey for her. Priya smiled. Priya nodded. Priya had no idea she just detonated an 11-month-long bomb in my chest. I was 36 years old. I was 6 weeks away from our 8th anniversary. I had a daughter at home named Wren who was 4 and slept with a stuffed turtle named Captain. And I had just learned my husband had a standing order at a coffee shop I had never been to before, for a woman I had never heard of. At an hour he had always told me he was at the gym. I smiled. I thanked Priya. I took my cup and I walked out of that cafe behind Ansel, and I did not cry. Not then. What Ansel didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I work as a medical examiner assistant at the Chatham County Coroner's Office. My whole job is noticing things that other people missed. Small things, hair fibers, bruise patterns, the gap between what a body looks like and what someone said happened to it. I'd been noticing things about Ansel for 11 months. And that morning, as he kissed my forehead and told me he loved me and drove off to an early meeting, I sat in my Honda with a lavender honey latte I didn't order and made a decision. The decision didn't feel dramatic. It felt like closing a drawer. I was done. And he had no idea. To understand how I got to that parking lot, you need to know who I was before I stopped being quiet. I grew up in a small brick house in Waycross, Georgia, the middle of 3 daughters, in a family where my father worked 2 shifts at the Rayonier Mill and my mother did books for a funeral home. The funeral home is important. I grew up on the edges of death, not in a morbid way, in a procedural way. My mother would come home and say things like, the Hendersons are fighting over the pearls again. And my grandmother, her name was Mamie Doreen, and she lived with us until she died when I was 19, would shake her head and say her one line. Mamie Doreen had a saying. She said it to me when my first boyfriend cheated on me at 16. She said it again when my sister Tessa got screwed over in a custody battle. She said it so often I had it embroidered on a kitchen towel that hangs in my laundry room right now. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones, child. That's what she'd say. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones. She meant, don't announce what you're doing. Don't threaten. Don't warn. Just move, slow and steady, while they think you're standing still. Remember that towel. It matters later. I was the quiet daughter. Tessa was the loud one. She screamed. She broke dishes. She dated bikers. Our youngest, Fern, was the golden one, the one who got a volleyball scholarship. I was the one who read books in the corner and remembered every conversation anyone ever had in front of me. That was my superpower, if you could call it that. I remembered words, not the gist, the actual words, the pauses, who looked at who, what they did with their hands. I didn't know it then, but that one habit would be the reason I'm telling you this story instead of a detective telling it at my funeral. I went to Savannah College for 2 years, dropped out when my father got sick, worked at a Publix deli for 3 years, and eventually found my way into a medical assistant program. I took the coroner's office job because it paid $47,800 a year, had benefits, and nobody talked to me unless they had to. The bodies didn't lie. The paperwork didn't gossip. It was peaceful. I met Ansel at a friend's wedding in 2016. He was a groomsman. He was tall, had dimples, taught high school history at Savannah Country Day, and told me on our first date that he had never felt this way about anyone. I was 28. I was lonely. I believed him. What I should have noticed, and what I tell myself now over and over, is that on our 3rd date his phone rang, and he silenced it without looking at the screen. And when I asked, jokingly, "Another girlfriend?" he laughed and said, "Something like that." Then he changed the subject so fast I got whiplash. That was warning number 1. I filed it away. I married him anyway. I had a daughter with him. I bought a little house with him on East 40th Street in the Starland district, painted the porch swing teal, and planted 3 fig trees in the backyard. Remember the fig trees? They matter too. For 5 years, I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect. He traveled for continuing education a lot. He worked late during football season because he volunteered as an assistant coach. He was generous with gifts and short on time. But he was charming with Ren, and Ren adored him. And when I'd come home from a hard shift, the kind where I'd cataloged a teenager's body for 6 hours, he'd pour me a glass of wine and rub my feet and ask me about my day like it mattered. I used to think, I got so lucky. Reader, I did not get lucky. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday in March of last year. I was putting away laundry. I picked up his navy blazer off the chair in our bedroom and something fell out of the inside pocket. A lipstick, drugstore, matte red. The shade was called Wildfire. I don't wear red lipstick. I don't wear lipstick at all. I'm a chapstick woman. Always have been. I stood there in my bedroom at 3:47 in the afternoon, holding a tube of Wildfire lipstick in my left hand and a folded men's dress shirt in my right. And my stomach did this slow, sideways roll, like standing up too fast. And here's the part I think about the most, even now. The blazer still smelled like him, his cedar cologne, the starch from the dry cleaners on Whitaker. But underneath that, faint and sweet and not mine, was a perfume. Something citrus, something younger. I pressed the lapel to my face, right there in the afternoon light, and I breathed it in like a woman identifying a body. I will never forget that smell. Grapefruit and vanilla and a bright, expensive alcohol note. I smelled her before I heard her name. My own body knew before my brain did. The laundry basket was still warm from the dryer. The house was making that small clicking sound houses make when nobody's home. And underneath everything, like a second heartbeat, the citrus. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I didn't throw the lipstick. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones, child. I put the lipstick back in the blazer pocket, exactly where I found it, same angle, same depth. I finished the laundry. I made chicken piccata for dinner. I asked Ansel about his day. He told me a long story about a student who'd plagiarized a paper on Reconstruction. He was funny. He was warm. He kissed Ren on the top of her head and asked her about her turtle. That night, after he fell asleep, I went into my home office and opened a new note on my laptop. I titled it, Items. Item 1. Wildfire lipstick, navy blazer inside pocket. Right side, March 12th, photographed. I had photographed it. Of course I had. I work at a coroner's office. Evidence is what I do. The next 11 months, that document grew. Item 7. Hotel receipt, Planters Inn, $287.43, April 8th. Found in Gene's pocket. He told me he was at a football clinic in Macon that weekend. Found item 14. Second cell phone, prepaid. Found taped under the third drawer of his dresser. May 22nd. Did not open. Did not touch. Item 23. Text message visible on Apple Watch during nap, June 19. Can't stop thinking about Saturday. Sender, D.D. Delphine. Item 31. Long blonde hair, passenger seat headrest of his Audi, August 4th. Collected, bagged, labeled. I'm not proud of that last one. Actually, you know what? I am proud of it. Extremely. I kept working. I kept making dinner. I kept kissing him goodnight. I kept taking Ren to the Forsyth Park playground on Saturdays. I kept being his wife on the outside while on the inside I was becoming something very different and very patient. And the whole time, one question kept circling in my head like a buzzard. Why? Not why he was cheating. Men cheat. That's not a mystery. The mystery was, why was he being so careful? Why a second phone? Why a fake schedule? Why? And this is the part that started waking me up at 3 a.m. Why had he asked me, 6 months in, to move our savings into a joint brokerage account in his name because his tax situation was simpler? I had agreed to that. Like a fool. Like a woman in love. $1,200. That's what was in that account by the time the Wildfire lipstick fell out of the blazer. Most of it from the sale of my grandmother Mamie Doreen's house, which she had left to me when she died. Her life boiled down to a number sitting in a brokerage account with his name on the top line. That's when the second crack showed up. Not in him, in me. The first time Ansel's charm flipped was on a Sunday in late June. I had asked him, gently, because everything with him was gentle or it went badly, whether we could move the brokerage account into both our names. I phrased it like a scheduling thing, like paperwork. He didn't yell. Ansel never yelled. That wasn't his weapon. His weapon was quiet, measured condescension, the kind a teacher uses on a student he thinks is slow. Marisol, he said. He was slicing a peach at the kitchen counter. Sweetheart, you know how you get when you try to understand financial stuff. You spiral. You call your sister, she gets you more worked up, and then we spend 2 weeks on it. Let me just handle it. He didn't look up from the peach. I remember the sound of the knife on the cutting board, that wet, clean thock, and the way the kitchen smelled like hot stone fruit and dish soap. I remember the ceiling fan ticking. I remember a cardinal outside the window, the one that always ate from Wren's feeder. Every sense in my body was taking notes. I'm not asking you to handle it, I said. I'm asking for my name to be on it. He set the knife down. He looked at me with those dimples that used to melt me. He said, "Are you okay? Did something happen at work? You seem anxious." That was his move. Whenever I asked for anything, I was anxious. Whenever I pushed back, I was spiraling. Whenever I remembered something he said and quoted it back, I was misremembering. He had a whole vocabulary for making me feel like my own brain was a bad witness. "I'm not anxious," I said. "Okay," he said. "You just sound a little unstable. Let's table this." Unstable. He used that word 4 more times in the next 6 months. I wrote down the dates. Item 38, item 44, item 51, item 58. He started doing other things too. Small at first, then not. He forgot to invite me to his parents' anniversary party in July, then told everyone at the party I had a migraine. His mother, a woman named Corinne, who once told me my fig trees were aggressive, called me the next day to ask if I was doing okay mentally. I said I was fine. She said, "Ansel says you've been crying a lot." I had not cried once. He took Wren out for daddy-daughter ice cream in August, and Wren came home and told me she met Daddy's work friend who had really shiny hair. "What color was her hair, baby?" I asked, wiping chocolate off Wren's chin. "Yellow," Wren said, "like the crayon." She said I was adorable. Item 33. In September, I came home early from a double shift and found him on the couch on FaceTime with someone laughing. He slammed the laptop shut so fast it cracked the corner of the screen. He told me it was a colleague. I asked which one. He said, "Why do you need to know?" When I didn't answer, he said, "You're being weird. Are you taking your vitamins?" Item 42. In October, he sold my grandmother's antique sewing table without asking me. Mamie Doreen's table, the one she'd had since 1962. He said he needed the space in the garage. I asked where he sold it. He said Facebook Marketplace. I checked his Facebook Marketplace. There was no listing. There had never been a listing. Item 47. That was the night I started recording. I bought a small audio recorder at a pawn shop on Abercorn, the kind that looks like a USB stick, and I started leaving it in the house. In the kitchen during dinner. In my purse during arguments. In the cup holder of his Audi on a Saturday when he borrowed my garage door opener and asked if I could take Wren to your sister's for a sleepover because he was crashing hard from a migraine. The Audi recording is when I heard her voice for the first time. "Did you tell her yet?" A woman's voice. Light, a little scratchy. "Ansel, it's been a year." "I can't yet. She'd lose it. She's so fragile." "She's not fragile. She's annoying. Tell her you want the house and the account. She'll sign. She always signs." "Delphine, stop." "I'm serious. Get the 401 out before she starts asking again. Then we can actually plan something." The 401. $401,200. The recording was 14 minutes long. I listened to it 17 times in one night in my car in the parking lot of a Kroger on Waters Avenue. eating a sleeve of saltines because I couldn't taste anything else without gagging. That was the night I stopped being his wife. In my head. On paper, I was still Mrs. Marisol. In the eyes of the law, in our bed, in Wren's mind, I was still his wife. But inside my chest, where Mamie Doreen's kitchen towel had been embroidered, I was already gone. The next morning I made him waffles. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones, child. Things got worse in December. He came home from a work trip with a sunburn, in Savannah, in December. He got angry when I asked about it, not yelling angry, his version which was icier. He said, "Marisol, I need you to stop interrogating me. I am exhausted. I work full-time. I am the only stable adult in this house, and I can't keep coming home to this." The only stable adult in this house. Wren was coloring at the table. She looked up. She's 4. She's not dumb. She said, "Daddy, Mommy's stable." He looked at her. He said, "Don't talk to grown-ups like that, Wren." She started to cry, quietly, into her coloring book. He didn't apologize. He walked out of the room and poured himself a bourbon. I picked her up. I carried her to bed. I sang the turtle song Mamie Doreen used to sing to me. And I decided, lying next to my crying 4-year-old in a twin bed covered in turtle sheets, that Ansel was going to lose every single thing he loved, not because I was going to take it, because I was going to let the truth take it while I stood there quietly and watched. Then came the bathroom door. January 11th. I was getting out of the shower. He was in our bedroom. I heard him on a call, the second phone, the one I wasn't supposed to know about. And he was laughing. I opened the bathroom door a crack. I heard him say, "She has no idea. She's upstairs washing her hair like a golden retriever. Like a golden retriever." I closed the door. I got back in the shower. I turned the water as hot as it would go. And I stood there for 11 minutes and I did not cry. I planned. 3 nights later, on the 14th, came the moment I almost broke. He came home late. 3 nights he smelled like her. Grapefruit, vanilla, the whole citrus mess. And he walked up behind me at the stove and kissed the back of my neck and said, "What did I do to deserve you?" I stirred the pot. I said, "I ask myself that all the time." He laughed. He thought I was flirting. Then at dinner he did something new. He set his fork down. He looked at me like a man reading a report. He said, "Marisol, I've been thinking. I want us to update our wills. Nothing dramatic, just in case something happens to either of us. Wren needs a clean path. You understand?" I looked at him over the rim of my water glass. I said, "A clean path." "A simple document," he said. "I'll have Patrick draw it up. You just sign." Patrick was his fraternity brother. Patrick was a real estate attorney in Pooler who, I would later learn from Caledonia, had notarized 2 of Ansel's forged signatures already. I said, "Let me think about it." He said, "What's there to think about?" I said, "A week." He stared at me. For the first time in 11 months, I watched his face do something it hadn't done before. It went flat, not angry. Flat, like a door closing, like a man deciding. Then the dimples came back. He said, "Sure, kiddo, whatever you need. Take your week." I went to the bathroom. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and I texted Caledonia Reeves one word, "Escalation." She texted back in 40 seconds. "Do not sign anything. Not a birthday card. Not a permission slip. Nothing with your signature leaves that house without a photograph. I am moving up the timeline." I walked back out to the dinner table. I smiled. I asked Ansel how the peach cobbler turned out. I complimented the crust. I asked if he wanted ice cream. He said yes. I served him a bowl. I watched him eat it. Then, January 19th, the Foxy Loxy moment. Priya, Delphine, the latte. That was the last morning Ansel was going to wake up and think he was the smartest person in our marriage. Here's what he didn't know. What Delphine didn't know. What Corinne, his mother, sure as hell didn't know. 8 months earlier, back in May, right after I found the second phone, I'd gone to see a woman named Odalis Britton. Odalis was a retired paralegal who lived 3 doors down from Mamie Doreen's old house and had been my grandmother's bridge partner for 22 years. Odalis was 78, sharp as a bone saw, and she had opinions about men. When I showed up at her door with a grocery bag of evidence and a shaking hand, she sat me down at her kitchen table, poured me a sweet tea, and said, "Baby, tell me everything. Start at the lipstick." So I did. Odalis is the reason I survived this, not a professional, not an attorney on retainer, a 78-year-old woman who knew exactly what to do because she'd watched it happen to friends for 6 decades. She told me 3 things that day. 1. Do not file for divorce. Not yet. Divorce is civil. Civil court takes years and he'll spend your money fighting you. 2. If he's hiding money, there's probably a paper trail you haven't found. Find it. 3. Sugar. If he told that woman to stop calling her fragile, he's planning something. Men like him don't settle for affairs. They settle for widowhoods or hospitalizations. You listen to me. I listened. Over the next 7 months, here's what I did. I photographed every document in his home office, every file, every drawer. On a weekend when he took Ren to his mother's for a daddy weekend, which I now knew meant he dropped Ren at Corinne's and went to a hotel with Delphine, I went through his filing cabinet systematically, the way I'd go through a death scene. Methodical, quiet, gloves on, phone camera clicking. I found the second phone's carrier records taped inside an old tax binder. I found a life insurance policy on me, $750,000, taken out in August of last year. I had never signed anything for it. My signature was forged, badly. The L in Marisol was looped wrong. I don't loop. I found wire transfer records from our brokerage account to an LLC called Live Oak Holdings, registered in Delphine Marchetti's name in amounts of $9,800, just under the reporting threshold. 11 of them over 6 months. $107,800 of my grandmother's money, gone. I photographed every single page. I put everything on an encrypted thumb drive. I gave a copy to Odalis in a sealed envelope with instructions. If anything happens to me, this goes to the district attorney's office and the FBI. Odalis said, "Nothing's going to happen to you, baby, but I appreciate the prudence." Then, in October, I went to see an assistant district attorney named Caldonia Reeves. Caldonia was a friend of a woman I worked with at the coroner's office, a medical examiner named Dr. Philippa Osi. Philippa had gone to law school briefly before switching to medicine, and she knew everyone in the Chatham County justice system. Philippa set up the meeting over lunch at Mrs. Wilkes's. Fried chicken and collards and a manila folder I slid across the table. Caldonia was in her 50s, wore red reading glasses on a beaded chain, and didn't smile once. She read for 40 minutes. She ate her okra with one hand and flipped pages with the other. Then she said, "Ma'am, your husband has committed at least 4 felonies: forgery, wire fraud, insurance fraud, and what we call structuring. That's the 9,800 pattern, possibly more depending on what's on that second phone." I said, "What do I do?" She said, "You let me build a case, quietly. You go home, you do nothing different. You do not confront him, you do not file for divorce, you do not move a dollar. If he asks you to sign something, you say, 'You need a week to think. You come to me first, understand?'" I understood. We filed a criminal complaint quietly with the DA's office on October 31st. Halloween. I remember because Ren was a pumpkin and I carved a jack-o'-lantern with her on the front porch, while Caldonia Reeves was 30 miles away notarizing affidavits in my name. That criminal complaint sat in a drawer for 10 weeks, growing. The DA's office pulled bank records, pulled cell records, pulled life insurance records, pulled Delphine Marchetti's LLC records, interviewed the notary whose stamp was on my forged signature, a woman who, it turned out, had never met me and had been paid $300 by Ansel to stamp a document she never saw me sign. Everything Ansel thought was hidden was, in fact, sitting in a cardboard box on Caldonia Reeves's desk with tabs and color coding. On January 19th, the morning of the Foxy Loxy latte, I sat in my Honda in the parking lot and texted Caldonia one sentence. He called her Delphine in front of me. "I'm ready." Caldonia texted back, "2 weeks, I have one more piece. Act normal." I acted normal for 14 days. I made him dinner. I laughed at his jokes. I let him kiss my forehead. I let him call me sweetheart and kiddo and once, horribly. Champ. I took Ren to the zoo. I watered the fig trees. I went to work and I logged 2 autopsies and 1 infant death, and I did not crack. The last piece Caldonia needed was a witness. She got it on February 1st when Delphine Marchetti herself walked into the DA's office with a lawyer and flipped. Turns out Ansel had promised Delphine marriage in May, and in January she'd found out he was also seeing a woman named Paulette who bartended at a place on River Street. Delphine didn't take it well. Delphine wanted immunity. Caldonia gave her a cooperation deal that made my hands shake when I read it. Delphine had recordings too, 6 of them, including one where Ansel said, and I'll quote because I listened to it myself, twice. If Marisol has an accident on 17, it's not the worst outcome. The insurance clears probate in 60 days. Highway 17. The bridge over the Ogeechee. Ansel had actually said that, out loud, to his girlfriend. Caldonia called me on a Thursday. She said, "We're moving Sunday. Be at your sister's by Saturday night. Take the child." I took Ren to Tessa's house in Pooler on Saturday evening. I told Ansel I had a work conference and kissed him on the cheek and said, "Don't burn the house down." He laughed. He said, "Love you, kiddo." He was watching college basketball. That was the last thing he ever said to me as my husband. Sunday morning, February 4th, 6:47 a.m., Chatham County Sheriff's deputies knocked on the door of our teal-porched house on East 40th Street with a warrant for Ansel's arrest on charges of forgery, wire fraud, insurance fraud, structuring, and conspiracy to commit murder. He answered the door in boxer shorts and a T-shirt that said, "World's Okayest Teacher." I wasn't there. I heard about it from the neighbor, Mrs. Estefania Polk, who was walking her dachshund and saw the whole thing. She called me at Tessa's. She said, "Baby, they took him out in handcuffs. He didn't have shoes on. He was asking for his mother." I want to stop here because this is the moment I've thought about more than any other. Not the arrest itself. The minute after Estefania hung up. I was standing in Tessa's kitchen. Ren was asleep on the couch with Captain the Turtle tucked under her chin. Tessa was making coffee. Outside, a pine tree was dropping needles onto the carport in that dry January way they do. I could hear them land, tick, 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 and I felt nothing. That was the strange part. I thought I'd feel triumph. I thought I'd feel relief. I thought I'd feel the way people feel in movies when the bad man gets cuffed. What I felt instead was a huge, empty, roaring quiet. Like somebody had lifted a piano off my chest, and in the space where the piano had been, there was just cold air and the sound of my own heart beating for the first time in almost a year. I thought about the blazer. I thought about the citrus perfume. I thought about the sound of Ansel's knife on the peach. Thock, thock, thock. I thought about Ren saying Mommy's stable. I thought about my signature, looped wrong, on a document worth $750,000. I thought about Mamie Doreen, who had died when I was 19, and who had said her line, her one line over and over, as if she knew that one day one of her girls was going to need it more than food. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones, child. I had gathered. My God, I had gathered. And the gathering was over. Tessa handed me a coffee. She said, "You okay?" I said, "I think I'm going to be." She said, "You did it, Mari?" I said, "No, he did it. I just watched." She gave me a look I'll carry to my own grave. She said, "Baby, watching is what saved you." That afternoon, I drove back to Savannah. Caldonia met me at the house. She handed me a copy of the warrant and said, "You did this. You did this quietly for 11 months. You are the reason this happened. I want you to know that." I did not cry. I went inside. I sat on the teal porch swing, and I called Corinne. Corinne answered on the second ring. She said, "Marisol, what is happening? The police called me. They said Ansel." I said, "Corinne, he tried to have me killed for the life insurance. He forged my signature. He stole my grandmother's house money. I have recordings. I have documents. The DA has everything. He's going to prison for a very long time. I am divorcing him. Ren and I are fine. Please don't call this number again." She started crying. She said, "There must be a mistake." I said, "There isn't." I hung up. I watched a squirrel run across the yard. I watched my 3 fig trees sway. And for the first time in 11 months, I took a full breath. Within 2 weeks, Ansel was denied bail. The conspiracy charge made him a flight risk. In 2 weeks, he sat in the Chatham County Jail in a beige jumpsuit and called Corinne every day, and Corinne told everyone who would listen that I had framed him. Nobody believed her. The evidence was too clean. The recordings were too clear. Delphine's testimony was too detailed. Within a month, he was indicted on 12 counts. The life insurance policy was voided. The brokerage account was frozen by the court, and I got emergency access to the portion that was provably from my grandmother's estate. $293,400. Not all of it, but enough. Within 2 months, Savannah Country Day fired him. His teaching license was suspended pending the criminal case. His best friend, a man named Burke, who had been his best man at our wedding, called me crying and said he had suspected something for a year but hadn't said anything, and he was so sorry. I told Burke I wasn't interested in apologies from men who knew and stayed silent. I haven't spoken to him since. Within 3 months, Delphine's cooperation deal held. Ansel took a plea on 9 counts to avoid the conspiracy to commit murder charge going to a jury. 14 years in state prison. No parole eligibility for the first 8. Corinne tried to see Wren. I said no. Corinne tried to see me. I said no. Corinne sent me a 6-page letter about how I had destroyed a family. I did not reply. I did not burn it. I filed it. Old habits. Ansel wrote me 1 letter from prison, 4 months in. I won't quote it because he doesn't deserve the airtime, but the substance was, he loved me, he was sick, he needed help, and could I please consider what it would mean for Wren to grow up without a father? I read it once. I put it in a fireproof box in my closet. I did not respond. He is still writing. I am still not responding. Here is what my life looks like now. Wren and I live in a smaller house in the Ardsley Park neighborhood. It has a brick porch instead of a teal one. I planted 3 new fig trees in the backyard because the old ones stayed with the old house, which we sold. I make $52,900 a year at the coroner's office, plus a small raise I got in June. I am not rich. I am fine. Wren goes to a Montessori school. She still sleeps with Captain the Turtle. She asks about her father sometimes. I tell her the truth, age appropriately. I tell her he did some things that were dishonest and dangerous, and that he's in a place where he has to think about what he did, and that I love her and her grandmother, Mamie Doreen, in heaven loves her, and we are safe. She accepts this the way children accept things, with a frown and then a cookie. Odalis Britton is 80 now. She comes for Sunday dinner twice a month. We eat pot roast, and she tells me stories about my grandmother, and she holds Wren's hand across the table and says things that make Wren laugh. When I thanked Odalis once, really thanked her with tears, she waved me off. She said, "Baby, your grandmother would have done the same for mine." Caldonia Reeves sent me a Christmas card last December. It said, "Merry Christmas, Marisol. You were the most organized witness I have ever worked with in 31 years. Do not change a thing. See." I framed it. It's above my desk. I have not dated. I am not in a hurry. Wren and I go to the Forsyth Park playground on Saturdays, and sometimes we get lavender honey lattes at a different coffee shop, and I drink mine slowly. Last week I was folding laundry in the new laundry room, and I caught sight of Mamie Doreen's old kitchen towel hanging on the hook above the dryer. The embroidery was faded now. 23 years of washing. The thread was the color of old butter. The cotton was almost translucent at the corners where she used to fold it. Quiet hands gather more than loud ones, child. I stood there in the good afternoon light. Wren was humming in the other room. A fig tree shadow moved across the window. The dryer was still warm, and it smelled like lavender and clean cotton and something faintly green from the yard. I pressed my palm to the towel. The embroidery was rough under my fingertips, still there, still holding. Mamie Doreen had stitched it in 1971. She was 36 when she did it, the same age I am now. I thought about that for a long time. I finally cried. Not the bad kind, the other kind. The kind you save up for years and spend all at once in a laundry room with the smell of detergent and a stuffed turtle waiting in a child's bed and nothing left to be afraid of. I folded the towel. I put it back on the hook. I went to go read my daughter a book about a kind, slow sea creature who took her time and always got where she was going.